Viva FM, the number one choice in Leeds.
I have Justin here. We are chatting about the life in general and how Justin is doing. Can you tell us about yourself?
I'm fine, thank you, at the moment. I mean, this is 5 ways recovery for people who are recovering from addiction problems. That's often in conjunction with underlying mental health issues as well. I mean, not necessarily, but you do find that underlying most addiction problems, people tend to have some kind of psychological distress, whether that be anxiety, depression, or more serious kind of mental health problems. I've been coming here for quite a while. My previous work as a professional was as a cognitive therapist in an early intervention psychosis service. I ended up with a problem with addiction and mental health problems myself as a senior worker there, to the point where I had quite a major breakdown several years ago, and I had to leave my job basically, and had a period of being very unwell. During that period, the last 3 months of what I'd say was, on the whole, an 18-month period of quite severe substance misuse and mental health issues, and that came with relationship difficulties, losing my job.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, was there one particular cause of...
Well, this is the thing. I mean, these things are very rarely one cause. It's often multiple things which then conspire to interact towards somebody's downfall, really. So with me, it was increased job pressures. There was relationship issues in my personal relationship with my partner. We were struggling to get on. Right. And there's my substance misuse issues as well, which I was also using to deal with the other problems, which was then adding to those and making it harder at work. Putting more strain on a relationship, and I spiralled down from there, really.
Can I just ask, people obviously, a lot of people have job problems or problems with the family, each other. What made you think that maybe using substance would help you?
Well, it wasn't as simple as making it wasn't as simple as making a decision. From growing up, being around substance misuse and alcohol use, I suppose. Alcohol use was the start of it. That was kind of quite very normal in my sort of local culture where I grew up. My dad used to own a hotel, he had a restaurant, worked in bars, used to DJ at night. So I was surrounded by him drinking regularly. My friends used to drink every night. Then we graduated to smoking cannabis. And taking other drugs as well, like amphetamines, LSD, mushrooms, and then I also had a job. I wasn't not working at the time. I was also working because it was quite normal for people who worked to use a lot of drink and drugs. But then I decided to get out of that particular lifestyle and go to university. That was on the back of some anxiety and depression problems. I thought I'd go and study psychology and try to maybe figure out how how the human mind works and try to fix myself, because I struggled to access the kind of support I needed where I lived, which was in Blackpool. Right. So that's why I came to Leeds, and I studied psychology, and eventually I did qualify, and I got into mental health services, and I worked as a therapist. And so going back to where we started, I was working in this early intervention psychosis team, which is all about trying to help nip serious mental health problems in the bud before people develop into much more serious, long-standing problems, and their lives get more and more detached from reality, if you like. So, but in the meantime, because of my own personal background, substance misuse had been a normal part of life for me. I wasn't addicted as such, but I just had a very serious problem which was just gradually getting worse and worse slowly over time, unnoticed.
How often did you use misuse?
I don't know, it varied, it just depended, because it depended what drugs I was using.
Every day, was it?
Not necessarily, but often, my partners were always professional people, and this is the thing, it's people often think that people who drink a lot or use drugs, they must be people who are unemployed or people in low status jobs, but it's not true, because my partners were both long-term partners, 8 relationship with 8-year relationships with each of them, they both drank every night. They sometimes might smoke cannabis. They might take other drugs occasionally at the weekend.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is kind of normal across all professions. I suppose I'd like to make that a clear point, really. It's not just something which is confined to certain groups of people. It's very much widespread. So it kind of gets normalised in a way. And then it's very easy then not to notice that your own problems are getting out of hand, because you can think, well, I'm holding down a good job, I've got a career, I've got a relationship.
Of course, yeah.
So you look at all these measures and think, well, what I'm doing must be okay then, and you justify it.
When you realise that you had all these things going for you, and you still were sort of, how did you really feel? How long did it take you to sort of realise, oh, now I must stop?
Well, it was at the point, like I said, I was starting to use drugs quite heavily when things got stressful with work, relationship, and I was also doing another extra course as well at the time. Yeah. So I was starting to have psychotic experiences myself when I was under the influence of drugs.
I see.
So I was getting suspicious of paranoid, suspicious of neighbours, listening, spying on me. I started to become confrontational with people and creating problems with my neighbours. Like I said, I had to leave my job, and then I ended up in a situation where over the course of maybe the last 3 months of an 18-month period, I smashed my car up, I assaulted my landlord quite seriously. I used to live with him as well in the same building, so it was a complicated relationship. Yes, but I attempted suicide, I ended up homeless, I was in a psychiatric wing for 2 weeks. And bear in mind, I used to be a professional that used to work and often liaise with those wards, and then I found myself on the other side of the fence as a patient for a couple of weeks. And eventually I ended up in prison, and that's what stopped it. And that's 10 weeks in prison was actually what stopped me from using. I think if it wasn't for that, I would have continued down the very dark path I was on, and probably wouldn't be alive today. So that's to break the cycle.
Do you mind me telling what substances did you use?
No. I mean, it was a problem with stimulant use. Some of these were also legal ones at the time. I don't know if you remember around about 2010, 11, 12, there was quite a lot of problems with legal highs. Right. And I think some people assume that they weren't as strong as street drugs, but the actual truth was that some of them were just as strong or stronger. So I kind of got addicted to stimulant drugs, benzodiazepines, which is like Valium, for coming down from those drugs, and also using alcohol excessively as well. And those were the 3 things in the end which destroyed, my job, my life. So at that point.
Yeah, you say that. Well, you even been to prison, and the job is gone and whatever. I really, do sympathize with people. Do you see that, here in Leeds, is there a lot of this, from your point of view?
Yeah. I mean, having worked in mental health services for 15 years and also volunteered here for the last 5, of course, it's very, very commonplace. And, I mean, from my point of view, people are able to access the help they need at the earliest point, and that's obviously the best course of action, I think, for somebody's future prospects of managing to overcome these problems and cause the least damage to themselves and the people that love them and that they love as well.
Is there any medicines which can sort of people just say, instead of going to the services like here, is there any medicine which can just say, take this?
I don't believe in that, because the service I used to work for, and commonly now in services, we recognise that these kind of problems are not simply things that you can just, you can't just medicate people back to health, because it's not as simple as a biological problem. It's psychological, it's social, it's also social as well. So we're looking at things from a biological angle, a psychological angle, and a social angle, and tackling all those points. And obviously I'm totally against the idea of just giving people medication to try to solve complex problems, such as addiction.
There may be some people who have these sort of problems. What would your advice be to them? is there a point they need to look for, or can they just decide here and now, okay, we have to give this up, this is no good?
Yeah, but people have to come to the point where they realise themselves, because people's families and friends and make it very clear to them quite often that they've got a problem, but until that person's ready to accept that, then it's very, very easy to stay in denial about having a very serious addiction problem. And especially if it's also covering up a mental health problem as well, and there's more motivation to keep the addiction, because the fear of what life might be like when you remove that substance is a very powerful motivator which keeps people stuck in denial.